Hi, Stockwell Day here, day-to-day news. Thanks again for joining in and joining a growing number of people who are doing so from Canada and the US and around the world. Broadcasting today from Vancouver. Hope you enjoyed the show. We're going to cover some of the main items, some main stories in the US, in Canada, internationally, and a couple of cultural items that I think you'll find kind of interesting near the end. We'll try not to take too much of your time, but it'll make it a valuable experience for you. So let's take a look first. What we're seeing in Canada in the headlines today, you see the Prime Minister of Canada and also the Premier of the province of Ontario. And they are going wild with Stellantis. The car company has announced that a plant that they previously thought they would open, now they're not going to, and they're going to move it to Illinois. And we've got just completely unglued politicians on the Canadian side, forgetting a couple of things. Of course, we all want to see jobs. We all want to see investment in our country. But keep in mind, Stellantis, first of all, has been invested in Canada in some way, shape, or form for about 100 years. And add to that, they are still going ahead with adding a third shift to their plant in Windsor. So they're still staying in Canada, still expanding. But in light of everything that's happening, they have to take care of their shareholders' concerns. And that's what public companies are all about. So they've had to make this announcement. Now what we've got is the Prime Minister and the Premier of Ontario really getting into some name calling and some really wild stuff, saying they're going to go after them, this company that's been around for so long and been a benefit to Canada. And I would suggest that this is not going to help anything. Certainly, they would want to be sending out their ministers to talk to Stellantis to see what can be done, if anything. But this kind of public shaming, how do they think that's going to work when you're talking about companies that have a responsibility to their shareholders? Add to that the fact that when other companies see a government, national or provincial, going into a full-on public rant against a public company in that country, that's going to make them hesitate. And also, when any company that's looking to invest sees government people going after a company that has to decide to make a decision to maybe move to another jurisdiction, that is going to slow down investment possibilities in Canada. They need to be thinking, our government officials need to be thinking better and thinking clearer on this and not scaring off even companies that might be looking at investing here in the future. So add to that the fact that obviously this is based considerably and having a real impact with the ongoing bigger picture, at least from the US point of view, and that has to do with their own national security, and that's why they are going hard on so many countries here. I'm not a fan or in favor of tariffs generally, so I don't like it, but the way that we are responding and the way we're trying to get the US to be more favorable to our investments is questionable. For instance, to have the politicians of the governing party and even former well-known members of parliament launching personal attacks and slurs on the President of the United States and even Canada's ambassador or representative to the UN attacking the President of the United States. How on earth do we think that's going to help the situation? It's time for mature and steady and at first quiet discussions and start sending signals, Canada should be, to the US that we do care about some of their concerns. The fact that the Gaza ceasefire has happened, but that it was delayed by countries like Canada and France, making an announcement a few weeks ago, a very intemperate announcement that they were going to recognize a Palestinian state before there's even discussions or boundaries, and while Hamas is still alive and well, we now know and we're hearing from people involved on the inside that that announcement actually prolonged the time that Hamas was taking to finally agree. So on this and on issues related to crime, the US looks at how we continue in Canada to let out or not even put in serious violent criminals who then can find their way secretively across the US. We're sending all the wrong signals. It's time we listen to the concerns of our neighbor and see which of those we might be able to address. That, by the way, would include being more aggressive on the issue of fentanyl, on standing up to China in this regard. Great to see the Premier of Ontario saying they don't like the fact that China is upset with the mandate changes that Canada has put in on the electric vehicles. But keep in mind that particular industry, which would in some minor ways, maybe major, benefit the province of Ontario, has resulted in China completely slamming down the canola market to Western Canada, which would affect all of Canada. So a number of things to think intelligently about, to calm down and deal aggressively, but not blasting away in public. It's not really helping much. Let's take a look at the markets. Since the announcement of the Gaza ceasefire, what have markets been doing? Well, some interesting things. Post-Gaza, for instance, price of oil has dropped, not hugely, but slightly, because if there's a sense that a war is not going to be breaking out, there's going to be a time of peace ahead, then there's the forward-looking people who are investing are realizing that oil and diesel are not going to be quite as much in demand, so slight decrease in the price of Brent that we've seen. And then in the Gulf states itself, there have been improvements in the market. One interesting area, shipping rates through the key ports in the Middle East, shipping rates by some of the big shipping companies have actually gone down since the peace deal. And that's because when rates go down, more companies are able to participate, and the big operators won't be able to have an almost monopoly. And so the demand increased, players in the market offer more competitive rates, and shipping rates going down is another positive byproduct. Let's see if that will continue. A couple of interesting areas in the European market that we've seen right after the announcement of the Gaza ceasefire. Louis Vuitton stock has jumped up quite a bit, so you can figure that out for yourself, but obviously people feeling good about the future. And a company by the name, many of you would know it, ASML, which is in the business of manufacturing those chips, and I'm not talking about potato chips, that are so desperately needed in the AI and other industries. They've got a nice bump because, again, more people investing is going to be requiring more of those chips, and that's going to be a benefit to the consumer. A disturbing international case, or a case with international implications, and this is a heartbreaking story of a Canadian couple. The woman is a 24-year-old Claire Levesque, and I'm not even going to mention the name of her partner because of the horrific things which he did to her, eventually being found guilty just in the last couple of days in Scotland, of all places. They had gone there, and he murdered her in the most vicious of fashion. I really don't even want to get into the details. It was horrific. Also coming out from that story is quite a history of this guy and how abusive he was to this beautiful and trusting woman. Again, a signal to, if you're in a relationship with a violently abusive partner, you need to be getting away from that. You need to seek help and seek counseling. Don't wait for him to change. When it comes to these areas of violent physical abuse, you just need to get away. And in this case, Claire Levesque did not get away in time. She was brutally murdered and found guilty in a Scottish court and sentenced to life imprisonment, which was just and fitting. However, you need to think about the fact that if this had taken place in Canadian courts, if you look at recent history of how judges are ruling, it's questionable, definitely would be questionable whether this monster would have got a life sentence, and might even have been walking in a relatively short period of time. All kinds of other implications. Canadian courts and the justice system generally is heavily influenced by a culturally Marxist point of view, especially when it comes to criminology, and serious repeat crime is not dealt with in the same way as in our allied countries. So our hearts definitely go out to the family. The final ruling was somewhat, people say, well, this brings closure. No, it never brings closure. This family is going to suffer with these memories forever. But at least it's some small solace that this guy gets life in jail. Probably wouldn't have had that in Canada. On the culture front, a couple of movies that are coming out, And potential viewers of those movies are already expressing concern. One is a movie about the life of the Beatles. One is a movie about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So you're thinking, wow, what do those two have in common? Well, people are already complaining because they're finding out who's going to be starring in these movies. In the Beatles movie, all of the lead players in the movie, none of them are from Liverpool. And this has got Beatles fans really tied up in a knot. They're quite upset about this. We'll see where all of that goes. And the movie about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which follows, it's Mel Gibson's going to be involved, and it follows follows the movie The Passion of the Christ, which was the all-time Christian-themed movie seller in all of history. And again, similar complaints. They have found out that the person playing the role of Jesus Christ, in fact, is not from the Middle East. So people seeming to really demand authenticity here. You'll remember it was John Lennon who somewhat tragically said the Beatles are more popular than Jesus. We might see how that works out in the display of movies. One comforting thought is both movies deal with real life. Yes, the Beatles did exist. And yes, Jesus Christ did exist and in fact rose from the dead. And it's going to be an exciting time watching these two movies. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.